Okay, well, to round off the year, delighted to say, friend of the channel and my former Brexit Party MEP colleague, Ben Habib, joining me on the channel today to look at where we are in terms of negotiations with the EU on the Northern Ireland Protocol. First of all, Ben, how are you, sir?
I'm very well indeed, thank you, Michael. How are you?
Yeah, not doing too badly, not doing too badly. And I thought it'd be great for viewers of my channel to get your insight into where we are in terms of the protocol, in terms of, as I said, these negotiations with the EU. So first of all, I want to highlight the tweet that you put out making a prediction, and I'll bring it up on screen there. My prediction, you said, for 2022, Boris Johnson will accept ECJ supremacy in Northern Ireland. He will buckle like he did over the WA and then the TCA. Prove me wrong, you say, Liz Truss. Now, Ben, I've done a few videos on the ECJ and the protocol, but for those who aren't aware, could you give a bit of background on this, please?
Okay, so the ECJ is the supreme judicial body in charge of all aspects of the interpretation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. In other words, the contract that we have with the European Union over Northern Ireland empowers the EU itself, its top court, to judge whether or not we're complying with that contract, and to judge whether Northern Ireland and its British citizens are complying with the terms and regulations set out in the protocol. We have in effect handed over control to a significant extent of Northern Ireland to the European Union through the hegemony of the European Court of Justice, if that makes sense. It's effectively the annexation of part of Northern Ireland. And as long as the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, has that position over Northern Ireland, it is impossible for anyone to claim that the entire United Kingdom has left the European Union. Indeed, Michael, it's worse than us remaining in the EU, because actually what you have now is the hegemony of a third-party court, if you like, a counterparties court, judging whether or not we are complying with the agreement that they're adjudicating on. It's like you selling your house and the contract between yourself as a seller and the buyer being adjudicated by the buyer. You wouldn't do it, would you?
There's been reports that this was a red line for the government to remove the ECJ completely. And since then, there have been rumours coming out that actually the government's position on that had changed. Even that, perhaps, that change in position, backing down in the negotiations with the EU on this aspect, could be a contributing factor to Lord Frost resigning as Brexit minister. First of all, Ben, do you think that's likely? And second of all, what do you make of Frost leaving that role?
I think it's a dead certainty that the British government under Prime Minister Johnson are going to capitulate on the ECJ. What we're going to find, I think, pretty quickly in the new year is that some form, using the words that the government will use, of ECJ supervision will remain. And in order to make to facilitate trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland and to diminish the impact of that Irish Sea border, in order to achieve that, instead of refusing checks at Larne and Belfast and so on, what our government is going to do is align the United Kingdom more with EU regulations so that the need for those checks diminishes. In other words, we are going to capitulate both on the ECJ as well as the regulatory environment. Boris Johnson will then claim that he's got rid of the Irish Sea border and he'll try and brush the whole thing under the carpet. And yes, absolutely, the reason Lord Frost resigned is because the Prime Minister put him in an invidious position, having made the ECJ a red line, and then no doubt instructing Frost, I think it must have been about a month ago, that he has to give in on the ECJ, and that became unpalatable for Lord Frost.
Ben, what are your thoughts on the fact that we have seen now for months, this has been going on a while now, both Boris Johnson and Lord Frost, when he was in that role as Brexit minister, say that the conditions for triggering Article 16 have been met, and yet these negotiations with the EU are allowed to go on and on and on, seemingly with very little progress, and now into 2022.
Yeah, well, we've seen this all before, haven't we, Michael? Last year, there were deadlines set by the Prime Minister. In the negotiating paper set out for the trade agreement with the EU, the Prime Minister said that if we don't have a trade agreement with the EU by 30th June, we'll leave on WTO terms. Come 30th June, we didn't leave. Then he extended it to 15th October. Come 15th October, we didn't have a deal, but still we didn't leave on WTO terms. And then eventually we signed the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, giving way on all the issues until then that the Prime Minister had set out as a red line, including the level playing field and fishing. And we've seen exactly the same thing now play out over the Northern Ireland Protocol. In June at the G7 this year, the Prime Minister said we wouldn't hesitate to invoke Article 16 to suspend aspects of the protocol if the EU didn't relent in its position. Well, that was June, 6.5 months ago, and we've done nothing other than hesitate. Our Prime Minister does not want to challenge the EU. He is fearful of an independent, nimble, United Kingdom. Our Prime Minister has no confidence in his own government and in the United Kingdom. He fears treading out on his own, and as long as he continues to fear that, there is no way that he will stand up properly for the people of Northern Ireland and reject these invidious aspects of the protocol. But just coming back to your specific point, Michael, when they said that the conditions existed for the invocation of Article 16, what the government effectively was saying was that Northern Ireland is being economically damaged by the protocol. And the minute they accepted that, the government was not just entitled to invoke Article 16, it was obliged to invoke Article 16. Because as the government of the United Kingdom, it is obliged to protect the British citizens. It is obliged to protect the people of Northern Ireland. But they haven't done it. They've declared that the conditions exist for its invocation, but yet they are in gross dereliction of duty to the British people, more particularly the people of Northern Ireland, by not invoking it. We have a government that actually doesn't seem to care for 1.8 million British citizens living in Northern Ireland.
We've seen Kate Hoey just come out, I've done a separate video on it, Ben, say that Liz Truss, the government, need to ditch the protocol in its entirety now. First of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, if you do agree with that, what would you then see as the pathway forward?
Well, people say the invocation of Article 16 would result in a trade war with the EU. Undoubtedly, ditching the protocol would therefore result in a trade war. But the point is this, Michael, we've been in a trade war with the EU since 2016. The first phase of that war was them trying to undermine our decision to leave the EU. The second phase was them stitching us up with the withdrawal agreement and the TCA. And now they're stitching us up over Northern Ireland. And this trade war with the European Union will continue whether or not we ditch the protocol. The sensible, correct thing for our government to do is to ditch the protocol. The only genuine way, Michael, to get a proper Brexit is to rip up the withdrawal agreement, rip up the TCA, and for the United Kingdom to go independent. That requires a government to have vision, to plan for what the EU might riposte with, and to make the United Kingdom a Singapore on Thames, if you like. You know, a deregulated, low taxation, independent, nimble trading nation taking the fight to the European Union. But my concern is the Prime Minister doesn't have that vision, and he certainly doesn't have the competence to deliver such an agenda.
And finally, Ben, I think one story that got really underreported in the UK was the threat, basically, that the EU are putting together potential measures they would take in response if the UK did trigger Article 16, including, it was reported, the potential suspension or even termination of the UK EU deal in response to the UK triggering Article 16. What do you make of that?
Well, I would love that. I would love us to invoke Article 16 and for them to terminate the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. It would be the best thing for the United Kingdom. It would force Her Majesty's government to actually sit up and eventually plan for what they should have been planning 5 years ago. The reason I stopped being a donor to the Conservative Party was simply because they refused to plan for no deal. I went to lunch after lunch with cabinet ministers who all said there was no need to plan for no deal. The only way to get a proper Brexit actually now is to leave without a deal, to rip up these wretched deals and to leave without one. That requires planning for no deal. And if they won't do it, maybe the European Union will force them into doing it in a way that we couldn't as the people of the United Kingdom. I hope that we invoke Article 16. I hope the EU tears up the trade agreements in response. And I hope we can then get the proper Brexit that we deserve and that the people of this country voted for, and that would enable the United Kingdom to become a lean, mean fighting machine.
Ben Habib, great to get your insight. We'll catch up again in 2022. Cheers.